Welcome to the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening, with your hosts Fran Cadron and Marina Theron-Monnery. For more information about Fran and Marina, or to apply to be a guest on the show, please go to our website www.hopenning.com. The Hopenning is for informal purposes only and is based on the research of your hosts, Fran and Marina. They, as well as their guests, are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from this podcast, which is not intended to replace any professional medical advice or care by medical professionals you are currently utilizing. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today at the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening. And this is episode 88. It's amazing to know that we've been on the air for so long, giving people hope. And as usual, we have a very special guest with us today, Carolyn Boras. She's an RTT, a rapid transformational therapy practitioner and a colleague of Fran and I. And she lives halfway across the world in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. And Carolyn has been in education. She's been a teacher for a long, long time, but for the last 20 years, she has been teaching overseas as an international educator. And she can tell you more about what an absolute bold and brave move that is and how it's not made for everybody. And she uses today all the amazing tools of rapid transformational therapy to help teachers who went through burnout and to build and restore their self-esteem using all the amazing tools in RTT. So welcome, Carolyn, and welcome, Fran. We're happy to have you with us. So I want to start with something you put in your notes here, and that is that you packed your bags. You left everything that was familiar to you and moved halfway around the world. Why did you do that?
Well, I had a good question because a lot of my friends and family were asking the same thing when I announced that this is what I was going to do. But I had reached a point in my teaching career. I was looking at turning 50, and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to stand teaching for the next 15 years until I can retire with the way the situation was where I was living at the time. I was living in British Columbia, in Canada at the time. And it was so expensive where I was living. I wasn't able to save any money. I wasn't able to travel, but more importantly, whenever I walked into the staff room, the only thing that teachers were ever talking about was how long it was going to take for them before they could retire, how many years, months, weeks, days, minutes. That was the entire conversation. And I thought, I can't live another 15 years with this as the constant conversation. There's got to be something more than that. And I was actually at that point, like pretty much the only single person at the school. And so my social environment was very, very narrow because everybody was busy with their families, which is fine, you know. And as I said, it was so expensive where I was living. I couldn't afford to get a new car. And at that time, my car had 250,000 kilometers on it, and it was 15 years old. And if it broke down, I didn't know what I was going to do because I needed a car to travel. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I have 2 degrees, and yet I'm not able to make ends meet. And I just really was not happy. So it was very interesting. One of my colleagues, I was teaching music at the time, but one of my colleagues announced, it was early October. She said, "Oh well, I'm moving. I'm going to Cairo at the end of October, and so I'm getting rid of all of my things." And I said, "Well, how can you do that? The school year is not over. She said, no, I am moving there to live. I have a job. And that was the first I had ever heard that you could actually teach in a different country. And so that year, I followed her path very carefully. And I thought, she's making more money than I am. She's having a lot more fun, and she gets to travel. Let me see what this whole international education is about. So I did follow her path that year. And in the meantime, I had done a lot of exploration now. And I realized there is a whole world out there that I wasn't even aware of, that as far as I knew up until that point, I didn't have access to. So I did my research and I applied. I went to a job fair and I applied. And next thing I knew, I was in Singapore. And so there I was teaching internationally. And I was in Singapore for 12 years. And then I moved to Saudi Arabia for 3 years. And I'm now in Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam. This is my 5th year here. And I have to say, I have not looked back at that decision. It was such a great decision for me, but I know that that's not possible for everybody. Not everybody can pick up their things and move halfway around the world. But I had nothing keeping me back in Canada. There was nothing there from, I mean, yes, I have sisters and so on and so forth, but there was nothing there that was anchoring me to stay. And I thought, I have to do something else. I can't stay in this whole negative atmosphere. So the difference that I have found, one of the big differences I've found is in the staff room now, instead of people talking about how many years before they get to retire, people now talk about, well, what they're going to do. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go for October break? Who has a suggestion for a great hotel in Kathmandu or in Cambodia? And so people are talking about what they're doing. And it's been so much more positive for me, for my mindset. It's really literally has saved my physical, mental, and emotional health. And it's allowed me to continue full-time teaching. Now I've been full-time teaching now, I guess it's more than 45 years. And full-time teaching, and I'm 69 years of age, and I still like what I do. So it's been a very positive experience for me.
Oh, I want to jump in and say I want to look like you when I'm 69 years old. You look amazing.
Well, thank you. But I have to say, having all that humidity in Singapore is really good for the skin. Okay, so I mean, really, there's a lot of humidity there. But as I mentioned earlier, I know it's not possible for everybody to do what I did. I know that, and I also know that it's not. It doesn't solve all of your problems. It really doesn't, because there are countries, there are international schools that aren't great to be in, do you know? And there are pros and cons of each. I mean, for example, you don't have, depending on the school that you're at, you have to make your own plans for retirement savings. You won't have a union to back you, which may or may not be a good thing. It depends how you look at that. You're not allowed to protest depending on where you are, so, and in some schools, they advertise themselves as being international, but they're not international at all. That's just in the name, right? And so it ends up being a local curriculum. So as I say, there are pros and cons out of going or out of leaving as well. So a person has to weigh both sides, right? But I think the important thing is to make mention that it's not necessary to stay stuck and to stay unhappy and to stay where you are thinking that there's no hope, since we're talking about hope, because there is help available. I didn't know all those years ago where I could go for help. I didn't know what was available to me. All I knew was I had to like pack my bags and leave because I couldn't stay where I was. But as we know in our RTT work, there's so much help available.
And you said it, the moving from burnout and frustration and depression and all of those things that go with the passion of teaching. Teaching is a passion. It's more than just a career. Yes. It's a way of life, right? And if you feel like there's a ceiling, or if you're getting tighter and tighter in a box because of government restrictions and things you can't do anymore because of the insurance policies, and you do get so constricted, and it does feel like, oh my God, how long will it be till retirement?
Yes.
And that is coming from a teacher who is passionate about the job, but feeling so restricted and disrespected. And there's a lot of things that go with the profession now, like I just left it. But you talk about how you can offer hope. And Marina and I do this as well. We offer hope, but how do you do it with burnt out professionals, burnt out teachers, burnt out people who feel, oh my God, I need to change this career because I just can't do this anymore?
Just to go back a couple of a bit from what you were saying, I want to mention a book that I have just read, and it's just been published, and the book is called Pencils Down, and it's written by a former principal in the Chicago school system, and he got forced out of education through various events that happened. And what's really great about this book is the fact that the research is current, right? And in the book, I think he said the author is Michael Bayer. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And they did 500 interviews of teachers. And in the book, they include 20 case studies, and they talk about why these teachers left, what they're doing now, what words of advice and words of wisdom they have for people who are still in the profession, or people who want to leave, or people who are thinking about going into the profession. And, you know, what they mentioned in the book is that out of all the people they interviewed, the reasons that teachers leave is because of, it's not about money, it's about lack of respect and lack of flexibility, which are exactly the things that you mentioned. And, you know, they included in the book just a shocking statistic. And I want to just check my notes to make sure I get this right. But in 2008, Gallup did a poll and surveyed teachers to find out how many teachers were very satisfied with their jobs. In 2008, 62% of teachers said they were very satisfied. In 2022, 12% of teachers said they were very satisfied. Now, I know, okay, so that might be with the US surveys, but I cannot imagine that the statistics are that much different in Canada or in the UK, for example. And the things that I'm reading on different groups about the things that teachers are experiencing now is so shocking to me that in all of my years of teaching, I've never experienced the things that teachers are reporting now, like the bullying, the toxic environment from colleagues, from administrators, from parents, from kids. When I left Canada like 20 years ago, having kids be physically environment in the classroom, that was not a thing. Apparently it's a thing now. And, you know, it was a few weeks ago, in the school I'm currently at, we have one early childhood, one child in early childhood. He's about maybe 4, and he's got a lot of problems. And when I was dealing with him, this kid was physically hitting me. And I was so shocked. I was almost traumatized myself. I've never been hit by a kid before in all my years of teaching. And I'm thinking, good grief, this is what's happening constantly with teachers. And I honestly don't know how some of these teachers are staying. But as we know, and as what was mentioned in this book, Pencils Down, teachers stay because of financial obligations. They stay because they're perhaps the only breadwinner. They stay because they're afraid that their skills won't transfer over to the corporate world. And we know all the skills that we have as a teacher, and we know that that's definitely not true, but teachers don't know how to put their skills in the language that non-educators would be able to identify with. You know, they have to research the industry that they're interested in getting into, and then they have to transfer all of their teacher skills into that language that those people will understand. And the language is going to be different for any industry that you want to go into, right? And teachers also stay because they're worried about the benefits. They're worried about the drop in salary. Drop in salary if they are a single breadwinner. And also, they're also worried about not having the holidays, because if they've got kids, what's going to happen with, childcare? So people end up staying because of those reasons, because they can't move. But I like to think that if you have to stay, then it's possible and it's necessary to flip the mindset, that it's not that you're stuck. It's that maybe the only thing that you need to do is maybe change grade level. Maybe you just need to change the school. Maybe you need to change the district, if possible. Maybe you need to, if possible, move to the other side of town. Or maybe, if it's possible, to move to another part of the province or the state. Or maybe the other side of the country, if that's possible. But there are small little things that you can do before you have to take drastic measures, I think. And I think one of the really important things is to have teachers realize that they need to get rid of that imposter syndrome. I do have skills that people outside of education want. They just need to know what my skills are in a language that they can understand. Because, I mean, let's face it, people think that they know what goes on inside a classroom because everybody's gone to school. But they don't have any idea of all of the hats we have to wear constantly, and yet, people think that they can comment on what's going on in the classroom because they've all been to school. But, if you look at that in another way, just because I've sat in a doctor's office, would I think at all about telling the doctor how to do the appendectomy just because I've sat in the doctor's office? No. So, it's kind of like a spider web, things are so connected, right? And so in our work that we do, we know that if a client comes because they want to deal with, because the issue is imposter syndrome, we know that there are going to be other things connected to that, right? It's like, once you take out the first card from the house of cards, then the whole house of cards starts to, and then you find out all of the things that are connected to that, right? But, we need to start somewhere, and the client needs to start somewhere. I think for teachers, there's so much imposter syndrome. And, you know, there's so much because they've been bullied by other colleagues or by administration, you know, their self-esteem and their confidence have really dropped, you know. And then, you know, once your self-esteem and your confidence has dropped and your imposter syndrome has kicked in and you don't think you can get a job outside of teaching if that's what you want, then, you know, we have all of the other things that happen, like sleep disruptions and, you know, Sunday night scaries. You know what that's like. Everybody's got the dread in the pit of the stomach about all of the workload that they have to look at for the coming week. And then, you know, there's anger and irritability, and then there's exhaustion and fatigue. And, you know, if you're exhausted and fatigued, then how is that affecting your personal relationships and your professional relationships? And, you know, it's all so connected, right? So
how do you think in that book that you're reading and the discontent of teachers today, how much do you think the pandemic contributed to that?
Well, you know, I know they talked about how at the beginning of the pandemic, teachers were considered heroes. And then as the pandemic wore on, and as parents got to experience what it was like trying to teach their kids day in and day out and be with their kids day in and day out, and they had to deal with lack of resources. Maybe there weren't enough computers at home, you know, when mom and dad had to, and all the brothers and the sisters. And now, you know, parents had to try to help their kids with homework. Well, how are you going to help your kid who's in high school band with his band homework if you don't play the saxophone? I mean, you know, all of those things were happening. And then, you know, teachers ended up becoming the scapegoat, as they mentioned. And, you know, I think now this is just my opinion, but I think that doing all of that online learning, you know, it really pushed some people to the point of saying, okay, this is not working. And now I know I can work from home. And now I really have to do something to find something else that's going to make me happy, you know? So I think it contributed to it, but I don't have the statistics to back me up. I just know that in the book, they talked about how the public's perception of teachers and teaching went from here to there over the course of the pandemic, you know? And I mean, let's face it, if you were teaching at that time, I know this is what happened to us. On a Friday, we were still at school. Monday, we were online. Well, our curriculum was never designed to be an online curriculum. And yet you were expected to turn on a dime. So what kind of pressure were we under? I know what I was put under. How do I teach drama to 5-year-olds online? How does that work? I mean, it doesn't work. And so you were, I don't know, Fran, if you were teaching during the pandemic, but you know, for privacy issues, we couldn't ask the kids to turn on their cameras. So they may have checked in during the Zoom call, but I never heard from them throughout the entire Zoom call. I don't know what they were doing. I have no idea. And so you were talking into a box and getting no response. And so it's like, this is not teaching. And you know, how long is this going to go on? Well, I don't know how long it went on where you were, but I mean, we had hard lockdown for, it was 2 or 3 months. And I'm talking hard lockdown. I was in my condo and I was in my flat, and I could not go out. We had a ticket that said when we were allowed to go out and get food, and like Tuesday morning from 10 until 11 and Thursday from 2 until 4 or whatever. And that ticket was checked by the authorities that were walking up and down the streets. You know, I didn't know if I could get water delivery. And, you know, I was at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I was worrying about my basic food, water, shelter, my basic needs, right? So I think it's just my opinion, but I think that fueled a lot of discontent. So, but I mean, if with this statistic, 88% of teachers who are now out there are desperately unhappy and are not satisfied with what they're doing. So how is that affecting kids? You know, I mean, let's face it, teachers are in crisis. Well, education is in crisis, and it has been for a long time, but teachers are in crisis. And so if there is this mass exodus of teachers, well, then what? I know there are some places that are hiring non-qualified teachers because they need a warm body in the class because they're short of teachers. So then what? You know?
It's
It's
interesting what you're saying, Caroline, because that is the truth. In where I live in Alberta, Canada, it's the truth. And you see people of our age, we're leaving the profession because for me, it was too much work. It's too much work for the emotional payback. And a job shouldn't be about that, but for me, it was.
Yes.
There was, there's a monetary thing, but emotional payback was the number one. And after the pandemic, during the pandemic, it was interesting, right? It was interesting. And the first year after the pandemic, it was good. But then you started to see a huge shift in ability levels, huge.
Yes.
And so these kids that could not get online for whatever reason,
Sure.
For whatever reason. And then you had the kids that were keeners, their parents were keeners, they were keeners. And so the spread became huge.
Yes.
And in the meantime, me, an educator, 5th grade, grade 5, I'm trying to meet everybody's needs.
Yes.
And there were kids that were super emotional. It's an interesting little ecosystem within the classroom, because as soon as somebody coughs, it's like, who coughed and are you sick? Because if you're sick, I am not coming near you. And this is after the masking was taken off, right? And so there was there was so much involved with COVID that created divisions, not only academically, but emotional divisions within the class. Super emotional children. And then there was the COVID, long-term COVID, kids with long-term COVID that ended up missing a lot of school because they had been so sick and then recovered, but never really recovered. And so it's an interesting little ecosystem that we had within the classroom of 25 kids, which mimicked the outside world. And the teacher was supposed to just do it, just handle it.
Exactly. Like, work your magic, and there were also social, like the social divisions in the class as well. And, last year when we came back, last year was our first full face-to-face contact, right? And so I had, there were 3 classes of grade 1s. Oh my word. The behavior was shocking for the whole entire year. But then when you thought about it, those kids had missed the previous year of kindergarten. They'd never been to kindergarten. They didn't know school routines. They didn't know how to socialize. And of course, coming back last year, it was for adults, it was even very strange being around other adults. It's like, whoa, this is different. So as an adult, I was experiencing that. So, you can't imagine how kids are feeling when kids don't have the words and the language to express, right? All they were doing was just acting out. And so last year we were dealing with huge emotional issues because of that very thing. And as you said, huge gaps in learning, But as a teacher, you're expected, okay, come on, get going, right? And I think that with the parental expectations and expectations from administrators, you know, what I keep running across is people are so overwhelmed with the unrealistic work expectations. And, you know, more and more is dropped on your plate, but nothing is taken away. And so, you know, teachers are reporting, not only are they staying after school and working, you know, several hours after school, they're working on weekends, they're working on holidays just to get ready for the next batch of what is coming up, right? And I don't know if you've experienced this, but when I was still back in Canada, it took me the month of July to kind of go, but you know what? August 1st, as soon as those back to school commercials came back on TV, I was going, oh my God, I only have another month and then I have to deal with all of it again. So it's like you never got, you know, a reprieve from any of it. And I know, you know, talking to people who are not educators, oh, well, you teachers have 2 months off. Well, I have 2 months in the calendar where I'm not in the school, but I am telling you, I am dealing with all of that fallout from those 10 months, you know? And so I don't know. I mean, I just feel that right now in the position that I have now, I am very fortunate. I'm not dealing personally with all of the stuff that teachers are dealing with now. I mean, my school, I like my school, I like my kids. These kids are very sweet here because in Vietnam, teachers in education are very highly regarded. And so it's a totally different mindset. And so I can have fun with my kids, and it's not a stressful job, not like what I was experiencing back home, and not what teachers are reporting, not how they're feeling. I mean, I still am able to have really charming events happen in class, and that the little events that I can appreciate. I mean, this happened just this past week. I mean, it was very cute. I've had an issue with my knee the last several months. And so I had grade 2 kids, and we were doing a lot of movement with shapes and levels and space and all this sort of thing. And I've been telling them, well, about my knee. So Miss Carolyn has to do this, that, and the other. And so in order to demonstrate what I wanted, I had to get down on the floor, and then I had to get up off the floor. Now, when you've got a knee that's not quite right, I said to my assistant, I said, well, you might have to help me get up off the floor. So anyhow, I demonstrated what I needed to demonstrate. I got up off the floor, and those little grade 2s, they stood up and they clapped. Miss Carolyn, you got up off the floor. And I mean, it was so sweet. It was so, there are still those charming moments, you know? But I recognize that's not happening for everybody. That's not happening for 88% of the teachers who are not satisfied and happy with their jobs. And I can help. You know, in RTT, we can help. We can help. So, you know, I would like to say there is help available. I didn't know that there was help available. I had to move clear across the globe before I found help. But there is help available. And, you know, when I moved from Alberta to British Columbia, I was totally fed up with teaching by then, because for all the things that we've talked about, I thought, I got to get out of this job. And as it happened, I worked for a very, very visionary principal at the time. And I have to say, as an aside, That's the only really great principal I've had in over 45 years of teaching. This man was visionary. And at the time in my school district, they had started to but they started to grant sabbaticals. And he said, Carol, he was the one who pushed me. He said, Carolyn, you need to apply for a sabbatical. I'm going, why would I want to go back to school? Really? So anyhow, I applied for the sabbatical, and I had a year off of teaching to do the coursework. And I thought, oh, I don't want to get a master's. Like, why would I do that? But I wanted a year out of the classroom. And so I did the year of coursework, and I found out I really liked going back to school because I didn't have to worry about getting a degree because I already had one that qualified me for doing something. This was going to be icing on the cake. So anyhow, I did all of that. And then I decided I'm going to move to Vancouver. I'm going to go to UBC because I'm going to start a doctoral program because I really like research, et cetera, et cetera. And so I did that, but I hated it. After 6 weeks, I quit. And I thought, well, now what am I going to do? I decided I don't want to be in the classroom anymore. And as it happened, you know, I found out afterwards, I didn't move to go to UBC. I moved to get away from my family in Alberta and to get away from the family issues. And I thought moving 800 miles and putting a mountain range between us was going to solve everything. And guess what? It didn't. Because that black cloud came over the mountains and I still had it. And so after being unemployed for that year, going, oh my God, my money's running out. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I ended up, you know, getting some help and resolving a bunch of things. And then, you know, fast forward 2 years later, after kind of an interval in there, I was back in education because it was what I could do and I needed to make some money. And then I found out, well, this second chapter of education was better than the first chapter. And then, of course, 15 years later, then I come to, oh my God, I'm turning 50 and I can't stand this anymore. So then I moved again. So as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, Carolyn, you have a pattern of moving away from your problems. But, you know, it's, somebody told me this, either somebody told me this or I heard it or I read it a long, long time ago, that, you know, we all have our stuff. And if you imagine that our stuff is in a box and it's labeled Fran or Carolyn or Marina or whomever, and you know, the postman rings your doorbell to deliver your stuff. And you may or may not accept the package with your stuff. But if you decide not to accept the package, the doorbell is going to ring again somewhere along the line, trying to deliver your stuff. And then it's going to ring again. And this time the box gets bigger, the stuff gets bigger until you finally accept the stuff. And the stuff might be losing a job. It might be financial ruin. It might be relationship ruin. It might be a health issue. Whatever it is, you come to a point where you say, this is a now problem. I've got to deal with this now. So, you know, I think what I also want to say is your box of stuff doesn't have to get to be a gigantic size before you get help, because there is help. You know, 20 years ago, I didn't know that there was help. I didn't know, just like I didn't know there was international education, but there is, and there is help, and it's not far away. And
tell me, sorry not to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Tell me, how do you apply a rapid transformational therapy to these teachers who are going through burnout?
If they, you know, when they make contact, and then of course, you know, we talk about, well, what is your presenting problem? I had a teacher who said her presenting problem was a lack of motivation, and she was procrastinating and she wanted to go to the gym, and she wanted to do all of these other things. And so when we went into the session, we found out it wasn't really, well, it was a lack of motivation, but but what it really was a self-esteem issue, because all those years ago, her husband cheated on her and had relationships with, and so her self-esteem went down. And so if her self-esteem is right down there, why would she be motivated to improve herself and do anything else to help her current situation? Do you know? So that's how it's all connected like a spider web, right? It's not just the one thing. And so they'll come with the presenting problem, and then we find out, okay, if it's stress, well, what exactly does that mean? Is it are you getting panic attacks? Like what? Are you stressed and there is sleep disruption? Well, what else is attached to that? Are you feeling overwhelmed because of workload? Well, what else is attached to the overwhelm and the feeling of being out of control? Is it the looping thoughts? Well, how are we going to stop that then? That the looping thoughts that say, you're just a teacher, nobody will ever hire you because you're just a teacher, that. So we unpack that the way you would unpack it for any other client or in any other profession, and then, we do the transformation and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I've had like some really good success with people who have come. So yay. And what I want to say is there is help. There's help, I can help. I'm a teacher. I get teaching. I get what you're experiencing. And having said that, we know though that teachers have not cornered the market on stress and burnout. We know that. You can experience stress and burnout as an opera singer, as a real estate agent, as a dental assistant. Stress and burnout are like one and the same thing for whoever we're talking about. It's just we categorize it for ease of discussion, right? So anyhow, there we go.
It's like you said, when you were talking about feeling stuck or unmotivated or burnout or whatever.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be a teacher in front of you.
No.
It could be any human being.
Yes.
Who's doing anything, whether you're an at-home mom or whether you're a lawyer or people are people, and we have all been affected by our childhoods. Early teenage years.
Exactly.
Affected by the rest of our life.
Sure.
So depending on the size of the box, whether it's that big because you're younger or whether it's this big because we're older.
Sure.
There's more stuff inside the box to deal with the older you get.
Exactly. And if we remember that an incident equals a belief. Anything that has happened to us, we formed a belief about ourselves. So whether it's the incident is, I ran a marathon, I believe that I'm this great athlete, I'm in great shape, I can climb Mount Kilimanjaro, look what I did. Or if the incident is your brother called you fat when you were 10, what is the belief you have about yourself then? And if we can visualize that our beliefs are like anchors, and the anchors are underneath the water. We can't even see them, but all of these anchors are attached to us, and all of these anchors are just pulling us down, pulling us down. And the more that things happen in our life, the more we get pulled down, as things tend to unravel, the more we get pulled down. And if you imagine that the anchor is attached to a chain with all these different chain links. And so in RTT, when we go back to the event where this belief was first developed, if we break that link to that anchor, once that link is broken, you can't unbreak it. And so when you break that link, then, you know, and as we break more of the links to more of the anchors, then we start to remember our superpowers. You know, because we all have superpowers. We start to then remember all of our balloons, the things that let us fly in our life. And, you know, when we can, in hypnosis, look at that original event and look at the belief that we formed, when we look at it differently and start to understand, then we get it. Then we can flip it. Then we can transform it and go, right, that's not me. And it was never me. And it'll never be me again. So then, you know, as you start to get rid of these anchors, then you start to remember, yeah, I got a PhD degree. I graduated. I bought my first home. I just got engaged. I had the baby, whatever. Then we start to, as I say, we start to remember our superpowers. This is what I can do. That's who I am. I'm not this when I was 3, or I'm not this when I was in college. And my English professor said, you'll never be a writer. You may as well stick to your day job. Or, you know, you'll never be an artist. You'll never make a living as an artist, so you may as well do something else. Whatever. We can now fly. And so for the teachers who are stuck, and I know what that's like. It's like you feel as though you're stuck in a straw, in the middle of the straw. You can see that there's a light ahead of you. So you know and you know what's behind you, but you cannot move. You're just stuck. And so at one point in time when I was feeling stuck, I was literally marking the days off the calendar, going, how many more days, how many more weeks until the end of the school year? And I would look at that calendar, I don't know how many times a day, and it still said there were 38 weeks left until the end of the school year. And as much as I wanted to change it, it did not change. So, you know, when we're stuck, we forget about all of the things that we've accomplished. Teachers have accomplished so many things. They have so many skills. But when you've got all of that stuff happening, the parents and the public and administrators, we've got all that stuff around you, you forget about it. And you think that this is where your life is going to be for the next 20 years. And that's just not the case. Because there's help. There is hope. There is hope. So.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much, Carolyn. This is all the time we have for today. It was absolutely captivating to see your passion and listen to you speak about what you do and your absolute love for your profession and now helping.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
So one last question. How much longer will you be teaching?
Well, now here's the thing. I'm not sure. I still like what I do, right? But you know, at some point in time, I don't know when that is, I'm going to decide I don't want to do this anymore, right? And then I just want to deal with the teachers that I can help. But you know, Marina, when you said earlier about the health concern, right? Or the health issue that you had. I experienced a health scare a few years ago, and I decided that there is a reason that I was given a second chance. And when I was deciding, well, when I decide to like not retire, but leave the classroom, I thought, well, what could I do to help? And I thought, well, I know about education. I know about teaching. And there are so many teachers who need help. I thought, this is how I'm going to give back. I'm going to help because I can help. And so I thought, that's the reason I was given a second chance, so that I can give back. Because there's so much need out there. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm never going to retire. I'm going to inspire.
Wonderful. So Fran, you had a
Thank
health
you.
situation last year as well. Did you feel the same way about that?
You know, because of my health situation, absolutely. And it was just a little bit later in the year than this. And I realized, you know, our lifespan is getting shorter. So,
Yes. Yes.
And for me, learning is a huge thing, to be able to continue to learn and learn and learn and learn.
Sure.
And I just felt I could do a better job for myself
Yes.
outside the classroom
Yes.
than devoting that many hours a day and a year to it.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And, you know, so when I was looking at turning 50, I'm going, well, that's kind of like a big number. I don't know how I feel about that. And so I knew I was going overseas, and I thought, okay, my 50s are going to be my decade of adventure. And they were, because I was overseas and I was doing lots and lots of traveling. And then as I was looking at turning 60, I thought, well, now what? And so my sister said, well, why can't your 60s be your decade of more adventures? I thought, okay, I like that. And now that I'm looking at 70, I'm thinking, well, now what? And because it's a really big number. And I thought, you know what? My 70s are going to be my decade of my second brilliant career. And my 80s are going to be they're going to be my Yoda years. Why not? You know, because by then, you know, you've got lots of knowledge and lots of wisdom, hopefully to impart to somebody who wants to hear, you know. But in the meantime, there are a lot of people that need help, and, you know, I can help. So
now that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Carolyn. How can people get hold of you?
Actually, they can get a hold of me through my website. Is that going to be linked
Yes.
to the podcast? Okay, they can get a hold of me through my website for sure.
Can you just tell us what it is? Just
yes, my website is carolynborashypnotherapy.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you, Fran.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marina.
Thank you for watching, everybody. Thank you for being here. And if you like us, please subscribe. And we will be back next week bringing you more hope.